Originally releasing in 1936, Reefer Madness trying to warn the public of the dangers of marijuana. Re-releasing in 1938 and again in the 1970s, becoming unintentional satire for cannabis policy reform advocates, and now as a cult classic in cannabis culture. Let's take a look at the history of Reefer Madness. Funded by a church group under the title of Tell Your Children, the film was supposed to be shown to parents as a morality tale teaching them about the dangers of cannabis. It was originally produced by George Hurleman, the owner of Hurlicolor, a two-color process that didn't need additional lighting. After the film was made, exploitation filmmaker Dwayne Esper bought the film and was showing it in different places in the U.S. under different titles. In the South, it was known as Tell Your Children. West of Denver, Colorado, it was known as Doped Youth. In the New England area, it was known as Reefer Madness. And in the Pennsylvania, West Virginia territory, it was also known as The Burning Question. In 1955, Albert Dazelle of Detroit bought all the rights to the film and used it for roadshow screenings throughout the 1950s. Esper and Hurleman did not protect the copyright. Reefer Madness is now in public domain, which means you do not need permission to remake or produce your own take on the movie. As such, a play was produced beginning in '98, and a TV show was made as well, featuring Alan Cummings, Kristen Bell, and Anna Gasteyer. Cannabis is a psychoactive drug, a chemical substance that changes nervous system function and results in alteration in perception, mood, consciousness, cognition, or behavior. In 1619, King James I decreed that Jamestown would step up and support England, so he wanted them to grow and export 100 hemp plants. Cannabis appeared on the $10 bill as late as 1900. In 1906, the U.S. Congress passed the Pure Food and Drug Act, requiring certain drugs, including cannabis, be accurately labeled. In 1937, the U.S. passed the Marijuana Tax, replacing the J with an H because the U.S. wanted to further their goals by associating it with foreigners, especially since the word was spelled in Mexico as marijuana with a G. Mandatory sentencing and increased punishment were enacted when the United States Congress passed the Boggs Act of 1952. Proposed by Democrat Hale Boggs, the Boggs Act made the first offense conviction carry a minimum sentence of 2 to 10 years and a fine up to $20,000. On November 2, 1951, Harry Truman signed the act into law. In 1970, Congress passed the Controlled Substances Act as Title II of the Comprehensive Drug Abuse Prevention and Control Act of 1970, which repealed the Marijuana Act, although the new law did officially prohibit the use of cannabis for any purpose. That's where this quote comes from.
So now here's Ehrlichman in his own words. He says, the Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies, the anti-war left and black people. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. How do you see that and then not want to immediately end this nonsense political war on drugs? Well, Ehrlichman goes on. He says, we could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Now, I'm going to show you how they're still doing that in a second. But when asked about whether he and Dick Nixon intended to do that, he said, quote, did we know we were lying about drugs? Of course we did. Jesus Christ.
In 1990, a federal law called Solomon-Lutenberg Amendment was enacted that urges states to suspend the driver's license of anyone who commits a drug offense. On November 6th, 2012, Colorado and Washington became the first states to legalize recreational use of cannabis when voters approved Colorado Amendment 64 and Washington Initiative 502. In 2014, Alaska, Oregon, in Washington, D.C. also voted to legalize the recreational use of cannabis. As of 2021, 19 states, Washington, D.C., and 2 territories have voted to legalize cannabis. If you guys liked the video, please subscribe down below. Like the video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.
Who's now your boss. And there you are on TV telling everybody, no, the blacks are more criminal than the whites in the suburban areas, even though they actually do the crime of smoking pot at the same exact rate. But they get arrested at 4 times the rate. Why? Because that's the whole point of the war on drugs. We have to end it immediately.